Welcome back, Richard. It's good to see you again this morning.
Good to be back. How are you?
I am doing well, and today we are following up our last podcast. We talked about sleep and we talked about difficulties falling
Hmm.
asleep. And today we are going to extend that conversation to times when we have difficulty staying asleep.
Right.
So, whereas we have we call it initial insomnia when you have difficulty falling asleep. This is something called middle insomnia, and that's when you wake up in the middle of the night earlier than you would want to, usually earlier than 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, um, too early to get up and stay up, and then have difficulty falling back asleep.
Right. Another name for this, which I like, is sleep maintenance insomnia.
Yeah.
So you have initial insomnia, can't get to sleep, and then you have sleep maintenance insomnia, and that is you don't stay asleep. That's the problem that I have.
Yeah.
And so,
That's the issue we both have because we have.
well, we got into a bad habit years ago. You and I did.
We did. We were working. We've been working on some different. We were working on some different things, and so we would get up, and the only time we really had to do work was 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
You know what I think about Bernie? Was it Lord of the Rings where they had the Middle Kingdom?
Right.
Okay, we had our middle of the our middle of the night. Our middle kingdom was around 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd meet
Yeah.
here and do all that work that we didn't have time to do during the day.
Right. And that gave us 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours to work before we started with patients. And so,
Right, right.
yeah, we worked almost a whole workday prior to our workday.
And then we wondered why we retired at night and couldn't sleep.
Right. You're right, it got us into this habit because we
Yeah.
last podcast we talked about the importance of routine. Uh,
Right.
and it does the same thing with waking, just as it does a good routine helps you go to sleep
Hmm.
at the same time every night.
Right.
You can get yourself into the habit of waking up at a certain time every morning. And if you're not careful, if you're not mindful about what time that is, it can be too early or it can be too late or at bad times. So,
And we messed with, we talked last week about that routine,
mhm.
about getting up and, going to sleep at the same time, getting up at the same time. And unbeknownst to us, we were messing around with that. And then your body adjusts to that new routine. And then, uh, you have trouble retooling that, redesigning it so that you're in a normal sleep-wake pattern.
Yeah. And it's difficult. Like I know this morning, so we got here early this morning again to work. And but so got up just about 4 o'clock this morning, and which is my normal time for getting up is around 4 o'clock. Get some work done before coming to work.
That you think about that phrase,
I know.
work before work.
But before I got out of bed, I woke up at our normal 2:30, and saw the clock, and I was like, okay, I need to go back to sleep. And so I find myself doing that periodically now, where my body still is sort of has this pattern of getting up. Really, oftentimes, no matter what time I go to bed,
Right.
getting up around 2:30, and
Mhm.
I have to try to get myself to go back to bed and go back to sleep. And part of that is because, again, our bodies like rhythmic cycles. And you mentioned this in the last podcast, that our body likes cycles. And our sleep cycle is just that. It is a cycle, and our body goes through different stages of sleep. And they're sort of divided into a couple of different categories. One category is called REM sleep. We all are familiar with REM sleep, and that's rapid eye movement is what that stands
Mhm.
for. And that's when we're dreaming, basically.
Right.
And that's if a person is in REM sleep, a lot of times you'll see through their eyelids, you'll see their
Yeah.
eyes moving.
Mhm.
And so that's where it gets its name. But the other stages, all the other stages, falls into non-REM sleep. It's a very creative name that they use for that, but it's non-REM sleeping, and that includes everything else, basically.
Right. Yeah. So the first is light sleep.
Hmm.
Uh, This is when, and we can't stress enough that these cycles, these rhythms, okay? And you can't trick your body. The body keeps the score idea. You cannot overcome these things. It's just the way our bodies work. Light sleep lasts about a minute or one or two, five, up to 7 minutes. So 1 to 7 minutes, and you're still not fully relaxed. And we talked about relaxation techniques last week. Your body's not fully relaxed,
Mhm.
and it's very easy to wake up. This is you start to doze off, and then you wake up, and you start to doze off. When you're in light sleep. That's non-REM sleep stage one. Number two, your body starts to relax. And this stage lasts for about 10 to 25 minutes. And this is when your body really starts to slow down and move into a deeper sleep that becomes more restorative. And deep sleep, the third phase, lasts from 24 to 40 minutes. So this is the time when your body's really into that deepest sleep that starts to become restorative. And this is when your brain really slows down. And
Right.
and these are the slow waves that we want to have. And it's these slow waves that brings our brain back together. This is when you consolidate memories. This
Mhm.
is when you really heal, you really work through the day's problems.
Right.
And then the last stage, which is REM sleep, can last up to an hour. And this happens when you've been asleep for over an hour,
Right.
because these cycles last about 90 minutes. And typically, the amount of time you spend in REM sleep increases in the second half of the night.
Right.
Okay. And this is when your brain really consolidates everything. In fact, what you're dreaming about is you're probably working out the problems in your life.
Right. In different ways. Yeah.
Right. And so you're just sort of dreaming this stuff because this is what's on your mind, and you work it out in your dreams. Okay.
Right. And if you take those times and you add them up, like you said, that cycles last about 90 minutes or so. And so we tend to go through the entire cycle 3 or 4 times
Hmm.
or 5 times a night.
Right.
Um, and if you as you add that up, you're getting up to that 7 to 9 hours or so for adults, where we work through that cycle that many times. And when you're in that deep sleep, again, you mentioned it as that deep restorative sleep.
Hmm.
Your brain waves, your brain patterns change
Right.
significantly during
Mhm.
that time. Um, During REM sleep, if we had you hooked up to an EEG and we were looking at your brain waves during REM sleep, your brain basically looks like you're awake.
Right.
And that's when you're
Right.
dreaming and going through all that. And
Mhm.
fortunately, our brain has a toggle switch that kind of flips off so that when you're in REM sleep, you're almost paralyzed. It's like you can't move because otherwise you would be moving. You would be acting out what it is
Right.
you're dreaming about. So, um, our bodies kind of protects itself by making it to where we really don't move too much during REM sleep. We don't move too much during deep sleep. But it's during that stage one, stage two that you mentioned, where our body's kind of relaxing, where we are in light sleep. During that stage, that's when we're shifting and we're moving a little bit in bed, we're repositioning in bed a little bit. And that's the time when we're most likely to wake up.
Right.
Um, we're most likely to wake up during that time. It's easy, as you said, to wake up. It's also pretty easy to wake up during REM sleep, but that's usually because something else is going on outside of our bodies.
Right. Mhm.
People are making noises or something like that. But otherwise, when we wake up, when a person has difficulty with that middle insomnia or that maintenance insomnia, it's usually because during these lighter stages of sleep, we're moving around and we're waking up and then have a hard time getting back to sleep.
That's right. When you do, if everybody has heard of a sleep study, what
Mhm.
they're actually doing is they're tracking these four stages of sleep. How much are you spending the right amount of time in each phase, and are you going through each phase? And if you're not, Why not? Why aren't you? And again, we can't stress enough that this is what your body and brain are going to do, whether you like it or not.
Right,
This is just how our bodies work.
right.
We stand upright and walk. That's our species does that. We don't walk on all fours. We stand upright and we walk with our legs and not our legs and our hands. And so our body's going to go through these cycles, and you have to do everything you can to make it possible for your brain to go through these four cycles. That's what we mean by sleep hygiene. You have to do everything you can.
Hmm.
As you go through the cycles from very light sleep to very deep sleep, very light sleep to very deep sleep, you tend to wake up
Hmm.
at various times. You don't know what phase you're in when you wake up, okay? But
Right,
if you're not getting enough of these cycles, you're not going to feel rested the next day.
right. Yeah, in fact, some research has found that people who are sleep deprived, they tend to go to deep and REM sleep much faster than people
Hmm.
who aren't sleep
Right.
deprived. And
Hmm.
so it's like your body knows that it needs to be in that stage, and so it gets there quick.
Right.
um, which is good sometimes, but it's also
Hmm.
can cause problems sometimes because
Right.
if you are thinking oh man, I didn't sleep too much last night, maybe I'll take a quick 15-minute nap or something, and you lay there and your body is so deep sleep deprived that you immediately go into that quickly go into that deep sleep.
Hmm.
Suddenly much more time has passed than you intended, and it can create some issues there. And we won't kind of get into the narcolepsy where a person who just falls asleep unexpectedly, um, and has those kind of problems. But
Right.
when you think about what it is that wakes us up in the middle of the night,
Right.
it's there are a number of things that we have to sort of look at as potential culprits. Obviously one is stress, and the main culprit here is sort of the sympathetic nervous system and just our overall stress maintenance that
Hmm.
is at fault here because it's creating this. When we're stressed, our body releases cortisol. When it releases cortisol, it also releases adrenaline. And so during times when we're stressed, cortisol and adrenaline levels are high. Obviously, by their names, adrenaline, that it's going to be hard to go to sleep if there's a good amount of adrenaline flowing
Right.
through the body. So we have to first look at stress as a potential culprit for what's causing us to wake up.
That's right. Keep in mind that when you feel stress, you release these chemicals which activate the fight or flight response.
Well, it's
So,
also why it's so easy to wake up and why kids always wake up when they had a nightmare,
yeah,
right?
right.
You're stressed. You're having a nightmare, so it's creating stress, and you start to wake up immediately, and so because it's increasing that stress level and it's releasing those hormones that wake us up.
Right. So keep that in mind. Nightmares scare us, okay?
Right.
The second problem is aging.
Okay.
As you age, you don't sleep as well. The brain is starting to go through some changes, which it does sort of in midlife, and they continue into old age. So the elderly always complain about not sleeping well or not sleeping enough or getting up too early.
Mhm.
Medications, of course,
Yeah.
different medications.
Yeah, there are lots of medications that
Yeah.
affect that. I
Mhm.
was just talking about cortisol. Uh,
Right.
well, sometimes we take medications like corticosteroids. Medications that we take to reduce inflammation sometimes increases cortisol in our bodies and makes it difficult to sleep.
That's right.
Antihistamines. It's always funny when a parent comes in and says, "Man, my kid has like exactly the opposite reaction to Benadryl."
Mhm.
Usually, when give a kid Benadryl, it'll make them go to sleep. For some people, it winds them up, and so it
Right.
makes it really difficult for them to go to sleep. So you have to look at over-the-counter medications as well as prescription medications and what that's doing to our body.
That's right. And these are common medications. I mean, antidepressants and heart medications and anything with steroid creams or
Right.
antihistamines. We have terrible allergies in Florida at this time of year,
Right.
and people are taking whether it's over the counter or prescribed medications, and all those things can interfere with sleep. And so
Right.
be careful with medications because it may be that you're either having trouble falling asleep or you're having trouble staying asleep because of the medications you're taking. And that's why in an earlier podcast, we advise people make sure you check with your physician
Yeah.
or nurse practitioner because it may be the medications that are the culprit here.
Right.
And also, there are a number, and I mean, I was surprised. There are a number of underlying health conditions
Right.
that could interfere with sleep, and these again, these are common problems that all of us are going to experience. Menopause is one. I've talked about midlife. For women, it's menopause. For men, it could be prostate problems. Sleep apnea. We've all heard of, reduced oxygen um,
Yeah.
during sleep. So there are so many physical conditions that could be contributing to nighttime awakening. And again, best to check with your primary care provider.
Right. Also, environmental and lifestyle things, certainly, if you have pets in the room, different noises happening in the house, all of those things can contribute to difficulty staying asleep. If you're trying to sleep and then all of a sudden, your 75-pound dog jumps up on the bed, it's going to make it hard to stay asleep. But also lifestyle choices. You mentioned this earlier. A lot of times people will use different things to try to help them sleep. So
Right.
sometimes that may be THC, CBD, or alcohol, and things like that. And many times those things may help you fall asleep, but
Mhm.
it's not a good sleep. It's there's different qualities of sleep. And I was talking to somebody the other day about they had undergone some a surgical procedure, and they had anesthesia that put them to sleep. And it's
Right.
like it puts you to sleep, but then it's almost like you immediately wake up, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
When you immediately wake up, an hour or so has passed, and it's like that was no time. Sometimes substances that we take help us get to sleep, but it's not really good sleep. And
Exactly.
so we will wake up as that substance passes through our body or whatever, and then it's hard to get back to sleep. And so smoking, drinking, all of those things can have a negative influence on our ability to stay asleep through the night.
That's right. And people often think that, well, if I have a drink, I'll sleep better because alcohol makes me tired. But alcohol interferes with these cycles.
Right,
Okay. Food interferes with these cycles. Um, Napping during the day. There are so many, of course, devices. All of these lifestyle choices interfere with, you might sleep, but if you're not sleeping in these rhythmic cycles, it's not going to be a restorative sleep. Yeah, you've slept, but you're tired the next day
right,
because you interfere with the cycles. So, keep these lifestyle choices in mind. You have to be mindful of what you're doing to your brain that's going to interfere with the
right,
kind of sleep cycles that you need to maintain across time, across days. Okay.
right.
So,
As we think about what to do to avoid waking
right.
up,
Hmm.
we won't spend a whole lot of time talking about that consistency, predictability, that nighttime routine that we talked about before in the last podcast, but that is step one. Step one is to make sure that you have a consistent bedtime, that you are, you have a good relaxing nighttime routine. Those things are critically important because that's going to help you not only fall asleep, but that will help maintain even sleeping through the night because it's going to be a dark space. It's going to be, cool area. You're going to be relaxed, all those kinds of things.
Right.
Um,
And and you got to maintain those.
yeah,
Now, how do you avoid, are there things you can do to avoid from
yeah,
waking up? Okay. And how about exercise?
yeah.
Okay. We don't talk about that. Are you sleepy enough? Have
Right,
you worn yourself out? Parents frequently say, my child doesn't want to go to bed, doesn't want to go to sleep at night. Well, if they're sitting around on their devices all day, they're not going to be physically tired. I
right,
mean, when we worked on farms, I'll bet most farmers didn't have trouble sleeping at night.
Right.
because they exhausted themselves during the day. When we did physical labor, whether it was in a factory, a farm, or a construction site, I don't think my father ever had trouble sleeping because he worked in construction. So
Mhm.
he was tired when he came home. So I don't think he had any trouble sleeping. Okay.
Right.
We don't have that kind of lifestyle now. We spend a lot of time. You know what? Somebody said sitting is the new smoking or something. It's
Something
it's
like
it's
that.
very
Yeah.
dangerous for your health.
Yeah.
So are you sleepy enough? Do you
Yeah.
have a good routine?
I think that, and I think that with that routine and with just the overall hygiene, I think it's so important. We don't really give enough credit to the importance of just the specific environment in which we're sleeping.
Hmm.
Um, we see this a lot with parents and with kids, where if a kid has problems with the dark, for example,
Hmm.
they want a light on,
Right.
but then they have problems sleeping. Well, intuitively that should make sense, right? If your body thinks when there's light out we're supposed to be awake, when it's
Right.
dark out we're supposed to be asleep, and
Hmm.
so if a child is afraid of the dark and so has to have lights on, certainly they're going to have a hard time falling asleep because there's a light on.
Right. Hmm.
We talked in the last podcast about the influence of stimulation when trying to go to sleep. Well, with a light on, there's a lot of stimulation. You can see everything in your room.
Hmm.
So yes, we understand that sometimes a person needs maybe a night light or something like that just to have a little bit, but try to keep that as dim as possible.
Right.
Ideally, we're going to sleep in dark places, dark and quiet. And sometimes you can have some ambient sound or some music or something playing, but dark, soft, and cool. It's important for the environment to be cool because, again, I mentioned this in the last podcast, that our body naturally lowers in temperature when we go to sleep, and so we can help prime that a little bit by keeping the room a little bit cooler. That's why a lot of people need fans and stuff like that when they're going to sleep, because that's what our body wants.
Yeah, if your body wants it cool and it's warm, you're fighting it.
Right.
But it's also true with the nightlight because if a child is so afraid of the dark that they're stressed, they're not going to sleep. That child is not going to sleep well. So you have to figure out where that balance is because too much light is going to create the same sleep problem. So
Mhm.
you want a very dim light that reduces the child's stress but doesn't create stimulation.
Right.
Again, how important that is. Of course, reduce screen time,
Yeah.
30, at least 30 minutes. I would say reduce all screen. Turn your phone off. Put your phone someplace else. Don't let it continue to stimulate you. Um, turn the, you don't have to do emails at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Nobody really, I mean, unless you have a job that requires that. Most of us don't. So you don't have to be on Facebook. Don't get off Facebook.
Right.
You should be off at least 30 minutes before you're trying to go to sleep.
Right.
TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, get rid of all that stuff so that your brain will settle down and get you in shape for these cycles.
Absolutely. And it might sound familiar that we talked about a lot of those same things when we talked about, going to sleep, because it is the same thing for staying asleep.
Mhm.
Now, sometimes people need medications to help stay asleep. And so, definitely, look at that if that becomes a problem, if you're managing all of these other things and you're still waking up. But I think it's important to talk about a couple of specific strategies for, what happens if you wake up and you're having a hard time and, you're kind of doing all these other regular routine
Mhm.
things. One thing, again, here we are to a paradoxical. We had a paradoxical strategy last time with thinking about worries, having a specific time for thinking about worrying. Um, and that is, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you have stuff ruminating through your mind, you wake up and as soon as you wake up, you're
Mhm.
hit with these different thoughts about things,
Right.
get out of bed. It's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead and get up, go to your desk or go to the table and sit down and write down what it is that's going on in your mind, because a lot of times that will be oh, I got to remember to do this and this and this tomorrow, or, oh man, what's going to happen with this or that. Go ahead and sit down and just like you do with the worry time, write down the things that's on your mind just to kind of purge, get them out a little bit. get a drink of water or a drink of milk or something. And then, after you've kind of processed all of that, then try to go back and go to bed again.
That's right. What you're actually doing is you're resetting.
Right.
Remember in the first podcast, we talked about do your worry list.
Hmm.
Okay. So what you're doing when you get out of bed is you're resetting that. You're going back and redoing
Hmm.
what you didn't do or you didn't do sufficiently or you forgot something. If you wake up and you're not back to sleep in 5 or 6 or 8 minutes, it's probably get out of bed, do whatever you have to do to get yourself back to calm, and then you can go back to bed.
Right.
So what you're doing is you're actually resetting, redoing what didn't work earlier. Okay.
Right. And
Um,
that may mean taking those deep breaths again, using the breathing strategies that we talked.
mhm.
It may mean, doing the muscle relaxation that we talked about. Um,
Right.
but doing something to help reset your body and your mind so that it can get back in that preparation for going to sleep.
That's right. And again, write it down. Be very thoughtful, very mindful. And there's another, speaking of paradoxical effects, I found years ago, a year or so ago, I happened to have a TV. I was in a situation where I had a TV in my bedroom. I don't have a TV in my bedroom now, but for a short time I did because of we were moving. And I found that if I woke up during the night, and at that time I was waking up regularly during the night, if I turned on the TV and watched a show that now I couldn't watch Mad Max or, shows that were too stimulating. But if I turned on a show that was calming, relaxing, I found that I was able to get back to sleep. And I think the reason that happened is because by focusing on the TV show, I was avoiding my negative thoughts.
Right.
Okay. And I'm sure that's what it was, is that once I shut off my rumination, once I shut off my negative thinking, I was able to go back to sleep. So
Right.
on one hand, we tell people turn off the TV, but sometimes it works if you're getting rid of negative thoughts.
Right. And for me, in those situations, what I'll do is I'll restart that sleep music that I was talking about earlier,
Right.
or in the last podcast. That
Mhm.
part of my routine is putting on some music to
Right.
going to sleep, and that playlist only lasts a certain amount of time, and so usually by the time I wake up in the middle of the night, it's already done, and
Right.
so I'll restart it, and again. But if you recognize the idea is all of this is there to basically do that bedtime routine again.
Right.
Having a hard time getting back to sleep, you're just doing that bedtime routine again, and all of that triggers your body to say, "Oh, we're going back to sleep."
Right. That's right. And that's why it's so important to have the routines so you can use them when you need them. Now, the other thing to remember, we did a podcast earlier about strategies you can use to help you get back to sleep or to relax and calm down. You can use all those strategies
Right.
if you wake up in the middle of the night. And one of those that we didn't talk about, we talked about breathing, we talked about worry time, the gratitude list. One of the things that we didn't talk about was something called cognitive shuffling.
Hmm.
And I would encourage people to really try that. I would try it tonight if you have trouble with sleep. You can try this immediately. There's a test that we give. It's called, you and I have given for years, called the verbal fluency test.
Right.
And what you do is you ask a person, say, okay, I want you to take the letter B, and I want you just to tell me every word you can think of that begins with the letter B. Okay. And so the person has to start generating these words. And it's kind of a difficult task to do. You think it's real easy until you start doing it, especially if you have a time constraint. You have to do this quickly. If you're lying in bed and you're racked by all these negative thoughts, take any word you want. It can be the word bird or dog or cat, doesn't matter what it is. So let's take a four-letter word like bird. Give me all the words you can think of that begin with the letter B. And so you start to bird and bat and ball, and you begin generating these words. What are you doing? You're
Yeah.
taking your mind off the negative thoughts
Hmm.
and you're focusing on something that's neutral,
Right.
okay, or positive, doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So let's say you think, oh, that's all I can think of that begins with letter B. Well, then go to the letter I, go to the second letter, and just keep going through those letters.
Right.
And generating those words will take your mind off the racing thoughts, the rumination,
Mhm.
and get you closer to sleep.
Right.
Right.
Another thing to do is thinking about other things, like whether you're thinking about how your room is organized, or how your living room is set up, or your yard or something, and
Mhm.
thinking about just again a cognitive task to give you something that you're thinking about that's taking you away from the things that you're worried about. Now, if you're worried about a home project where you're doing some new landscaping,
Right.
that should not be the thing that you use. Just
Right.
think
Right.
about that. But if that's something, any kind of cognitive activity that you enjoy, that's
Mhm.
that's sort of non-stressful, use that kind of cognitive strategy, just whether it's redesigning things in your mind, or thinking about your drive, or something that you enjoy, thinking about a sport that you enjoy, and you're sort of visualizing it and playing it in your head. Use that as a way to kind of pull you away from those negative thoughts that are distracting you and keeping you awake, so that you're focusing on something different.
Right. Find something that relaxes you.
Yeah.
Stop thinking about politics. Stop thinking about Washington. Stop thinking about your financial problems. That they're all there. You've written them down on your list. Okay, you have them written down. You're going to take care of those things. You're not ignoring them.
Mhm.
But think about something else,
Mhm.
no matter what it is, whether it's, thinking of a word list, or redesigning your house, or redesigning your yard, or doing something fun with your kids. If you have children, or you have people in your life that you want to take care of, sit down and think about all the things that you could do for them and with them, vacations you can take, or things you can do that are pleasurable thoughts, and you'll find yourself drifting off. Your body wants to sleep, but
Right.
you have to do everything you can to get it there.
Absolutely.
That's your obligation.
Absolutely. All right. I think that that's it for today. We do want to let you guys know that we will not be here next week. This is one of those unique, rare times when both of us are going to be out of town at the
At the
same time.
same
We're both
time.
going to be gone
Mhm.
next week, and so we will not be. There will not be new podcasts in your feed next week, but we'll be back the week after with some new things to talk about. But yeah, so just wanted to let folks know about that, because we do get messages when we miss a week here or there, and
Right.
wanted to let you guys know ahead of time.
Yeah, we do apologize for our absence, but we'll make up for it when we get back. And that'll be April, right?
We'll be getting working towards April. Absolutely.
Right.
All right.
Okay,
So that's it
good.
for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.